Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. I hope I'm being heard properly. Okay, so today is going
Yeah,
to
we
be
can hear
really
you.
brief. Okay, thank you. So today is going to be really brief since we already did much of the work yesterday. So let me just continue for 1 wait. Okay. Workspace. Um, I'm about to share my screen. Okay, so that's nice. Okay, that's it. Okay, so it's loading right now. We last week, let me just do a refresher. What we were able to do last week, we were able to first of all run an authorization flow completely with Postman. We worked on the authorization flow. So if you we inter we got the needed authorization token from Postman and automatically injected it. Postman automatically injected it into our headers last week, and we were also able to get our track by name. So we searched for a track with the artist, excuse me, and we were able to get the track ID and we're working towards getting the recommendations. This that was what was remaining, and then tidying up the app for our client. So I'll just run through a bit of what we did last week. We first started by creating an authorization flow, and we ran the authorization, we got tokens. I just want to confirm that. So might need to get it again. Okay. Says missing client ID. So I kind of forked this request from another. Okay, so it's missing some variable. So I'm just going to get that again so we can get back on track. So I'll go to my Spotify API. Uh, was- so we would go back into Spotify. So I will just reconfigure this so we can remember, just refresh our memories a bit. So the app was PHP Jambox, and okay, this was last week and the things we did last week and all that information. But today we're just looking at the settings. We're trying to get this client ID and we put it in here, and we get client secrets, put it in here. Always remember to save whatever you do and come back to get track ID to run the authorization, and we try to get new access token. and it asks us to authorize, and that should work as expected. Its request is taking time. I do not know why. I'm sure I still have my work. It's taking a bit of time, so we just supposed to redirect back to Postman to complete everything. Okay, so I think there's a bit of a problem here. It's actually on our app, and so they are saying this browser callback doesn't work. So let's try to confirm that everything works as expected. Okay, that's the callback URL. It's v1 slash browser callback. It's it is okay. So that is I'm my browser is having a bit of a wonder who else has noticed that Chrome has issues with their don't know what they are doing with their okay. Okay, so let's just make sure this is everything is okay. So let's try getting the access token again. I don't know why it's taking time. Okay, this is taking time, and that is I don't know why that is, but I think the error is coming from Postman. I don't know why that is happening, right? It's just taking sorry. Trying to find because I made this one public so we could use it for other things. Trying to find the one I tested this evening before I made it public. Still the same issue. Let me check. Let me change my network. Sorry, I I wanted to change my network to see if it would work. I don't know why. That's a network error. Let's try it again now. So what we're trying to do right now is get the access token so we could run the rest of the flow. Okay, that was worked. It was network. So that's we use token. So everything is saved and we can get back to the real business. So what I've done here between last week and now is I've just cleaned it up a bit. Remember our base URL, which is the Spotify API. And what we're trying to do is search for track and artist. So we search for a song by an artist and get the response. And so we're trying to get recommendations. That's remember the goal of this task was to build an app that gets recommendations for a music blogger. So the first thing we choose to do that was last week was to search Spotify for the track by name. So if you notice here, Postman allows us to have different variables for. So my base URL variable is spotify.com/v1. My track variable is empty right now because I haven't put in anything. Then my artist variable is also empty. So we would if we come to variables here in the general track, we can come in here and put in what we want to search for. Let me say I want to search for the song Namoni by Davido and I save that and I say get track ID and we send error service not found. Okay. Okay. There is a little bit of an issue here because I've already set base URL with a slash, so it's // search is going to throw an error. So I just remove that, save and send. That should work. Perfect. So we find this song and everything. And when we did that, we wanted to because we are trying to run a workflow and we're not just trying to make one call with we're not trying to make one API call with Spotify, sorry, with Postman. We're trying to create a workflow so the whole thing just runs at once. So towards the end of last session, we looked at scripts with Postman. So what Postman kind of does is allow us to write JavaScript. I know this is a PHP community, but Postman actually uses JavaScript in their environment to write scripts that execute. There's pre-request scripts that execute before this before this request actually gets run. And what this pre-request script could do would be maybe you have and let's say where I like talking about the OpenAI API. I've been using it a lot recently. So let's say you are trying to pass some prompts to a and the Open API. So you OpenAI API, you have your own API. You could use this place to make a call to that API. Sorry, to make a call to that API to get some data and then send it with this request. Maybe you want to set environment variables and then send it with this request. But in this particular workflow, we'll be using post request script, post response scripts that actually execute after we get a response. So let me just walk through this. This is simple JavaScript code. And what it does is there's a PM object. This PM object is for Postman, and there are a lot of things on it. There's response, there's collection variables, there's so many things. But what this code basically does, it gets the response. So let's say I were to console.log it so we could see what it actually does. Let's console.log the body. So it gets the whole response and save. Let's send this request and it gets executed and we can search for console. So in the console, this is what it returns and it's logged to the console. This has other things on the Postman console as well, like each request that happens for troubleshooting and all of that. And it now gets that body and says if you look at this thing, the body, it says body dot tracks dot items. Items is an array and the first item in the array, it sets it to, it calls it track, first track, and then says that track ID is that first track.id, then says pm.collection variable. So if you remember when we looked into the variables, we have something called track ID. Initially it was empty, but now it's filled up with the ID of the track we just searched for. That's the Namoni song by Davido. And it does that um automatically. Now we've gotten our track, we've gotten the song we want to get recommendations for. So we move on to the get recommendations API. So I didn't clean this up because I wanted us to just clean it up together. So what we could do here as well is to remove this and say base URL, and our track ID currently is what we got from the Namoni API, Namoni search we went. So we have the track ID, and in Spotify API takes the recommendations endpoint takes seed tracks, which is a list of tracks that we are trying to get recommendations for. But in this particular case, we are just using one track ID, and that's the Namoni song. So we're going to now send a request to with this new, so it comes back with our list of recommendations. We come down, let me open this up a bit so we can see better. Sorry, let me collapse it. So Spotify allows Postman allows us to collapse this thing so we can see things better. Artists, available markets, external ideas. So down here we can see a list of other songs by other people that are also similar. So we've gotten the recommendations. Now we've gotten the recommendations now. So actually we've done the bulk of the work. We've actually gotten the recommendation, but this is not really pretty now. If I were to pass this off to someone and the person will now have to be coming to this to come and check and check. No, no, no. That's 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 bad for you. That's bad user experience. So we've already used post request scripts here, post response script to do some magic here, but we are going to use it again here to make the whole, to make our response look better. Now, Postman allows us to visualize our response better. So if you look into params, you come in and see the response, ways the response could look. We have raw, preview, and then we have visualize. Yeah, and if you look at this, you say the visualize response with post bots. You can also set up the visualizer yourself by using a pm.visualizer.set method in test or pre-request script start. So that's what we are going to do now. We are going to make the response look a bit better to our client, for our clients. So I'm just going to go in here and copy the code because of lack of time. Just go in here and copy the code. Then I'll explain what it does. So what that code would do, trying to get it now from here. I closed the other tabs when there was network error. What that code will do will be to basically take our response data from get recommendations and then visualize it using the pm.visualizer.set method. Now, also, I don't know what relationship Postman had with JavaScript, but it's apparently tight. This is also done in JavaScript. If you've written any Node.js yourself, you would know about the handlebars.js library that allows us to, if you are writing JavaScript on the back end, there's handlebars.js that allows you to embed your JavaScript into HTML. So I'll just copy that code. And what that code does is Control V. It's basically, so I'm going to explain this in a minute. Let me load our, So it takes the top three recs. So start at the top and says top three recs is body dot tracks dot slice. So remember that we are writing a post response script. So this body already is the response body from our is the response body from our Postman response. So const body calls to pm dot response dot json, and it what is tracks body dot tracks dot slice. It takes it's dot slice is a method in JavaScript that picks the first three that removes some elements of an array and separates it from the rest. So body dot tracks dot slice creates that takes the first three tracks, and then it says track equals to pm dot collection variables dot get track. So if we go back into our variables, we see our track that we named Namoni. And what that's going to do is when we try to visualize it, we define an HTML template with variables. Now it's handlebars.js, it's a library. So how it does that is we call templates and we give it some things. Now, what this does is it gives this is HTML for some of you that can see this properly. This is basically just HTML that we embed our JavaScript into the HTML. So discover new tunes. If you like track, which is our what we searched for, you love. So this hashtag each is it's a for each loop. Remember, we're using handlesbar.js, so it's a kind of a framework that allows us to display it. So this each is like it's a loop. It runs for each top three recs. That's our top three tracks. It displays the name of the track and a link to the track in a play um, anchor tag. So and then it calls the pm.visualizer.set method, which just sets our dot set method, which sets our template, sets the visualizer to the content of our template, and then passes in the variables, JavaScript variables that will be displayed here. So if we run this again and say we did we save, we didn't save that one, so we cancel. We save it and then run this again. If we come into visualize, we see there's a green button there. You see that we have our what was looking very ugly and unbeautiful here looks better now. We could go ahead to style it with CSS, but I'm trying to keep this down to 30 minutes for this particular this thing. This collection is public, so you can always come back to it to just see how some things are done. And then with this just works perfectly as we've been able to get the recommendations. And if we play this, press this play, okay, it won't work here because where if we're using the Postman for we're using Postman for desktop, we would actually be able to play this song inside. We will actually be able to open Spotify inside Postman from here. So now we've selected the first song. You see what it does? It just opens Spotify with the link, and we can play the song. We can play the song. So, is it- so that is that is that's been that's brings us kind of this particular. So what we've been able to do, we've started by running the authorization, which allows us to access the open API. Let me use my So so what have we been able to do today? We started last week with we started with so we started with we talked about authentication and authorization. We explained what this authentication was and what authorization was. We talked about different ways of providing some kind of security to our APIs, and then we talked about API keys, and then we talked about OAuth, which is really what we have been doing here. We did it with the authorization. We did some OAuth where we asked Spotify for some information and then created a token that allows us to access the Spotify API. We talked about all of that. We did the all dance in Postman, and then we built the workflow, which started off, excuse me, which started off with us, started with us getting the authorization and then getting the track ID. We took a little look at the Spotify documentation and how to get track from the Spotify documentation. Once we were able to get the track ID, we used post response scripts to set the track ID programmatically, and then we further use the track ID to make another call to the recommendations endpoint to get recommendations for our song the songs that sound similar. Then we used post response scripts again to set our visualizer and make our response look a little bit better. So if anything we'll do very little something is I just want to add a small thing, which is talking about running the whole workflow. So Spotify allows us to run this workflow. So in order, so what happens is we run everything at once. So it allows us to see. So it runs the request, does what needs to be done, and we see everything is okay. So we can now come back into it doesn't automatically visualize here. So we'd have to send again. We probably get different recommendations this time. We got a different recommendation for our song, but we will ship this off to our client. The person can simply just come inside here, search for and that song with the whatever artist is looking for, and then run the whole workflow end to end and get this well visualized response. So, so what can we do from going on here? You could always go ahead to run your run your own. You could there are a lot of things you could just choose to do. Just send a link to the workspace so that you could look at it and extend it or use it to build your own stuff out there. So much you could do with this knowledge, this power that you've learned during the course of these sessions. So these are just recommendations of things you could do. You could create a playlist of an authenticated user's most played songs. You could create a playlist of songs with no words. That's like if you are studying at my school now, it's time for exams. You could go ahead and just create that, and you could find recommendation based on a user's currently playing track and other things. You could do a whole lot. Just explore the Spotify API reference, and then you could also become a student leader like me by going through the Postman student expert course. If you are in a university anyway, you could just go through the course. Let me give you my link.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fortune. I think that was really a nice session and really short. I think because we've done
Yeah,
most
most
of
of
this
the
stuff,
work last week.
yeah, last week.
Let me
So once
share
again,
the link to the student expert certification
yes,
so
please, you
you
can
could.
do that. You can do that. So thank you so much for sticking with us till this time, although it was quite short, but then thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. If you have not joined our community, please do well to join and also do well to join the student community for Postman. And at the end of the month, we're going to be having new sessions. We're going to be talking more about some DevOps stuff. So, be on the lookout. We'll most likely be talking about Docker, how to use Docker to containerize your Laravel application and all that. So yeah, be on the lookout. Follow us on Twitter at PHP Talks. And yeah, once again, thank you for joining. Have a great evening.
The cheers. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.